Hello, welcome back to FPL IQ. I'm Rob, aka FPL Hall. I'm joined again by teacher FPL Lucian, and today's a huge one. We are looking at Manchester City, the treble champions. We're going to go over predicted lineups, which I think Lucian might agree is usually like the most difficult one to predict, but it might be a little bit easier now given some injury and transfer news. We'll also be looking at the playstyle, strengths and weaknesses, and players to potentially pick, or ones that could be traps in this side. Lucian, how you doing? How you feeling about Manchester City as an FPL side?
I feel like the longer we wait, the more information we'll get. So this is pretty much a decent sweet spot while other teams are having friendlies and we watch them. Man City are in a decent place where they have a combination of transfer news and potential incomings that will transform the side. That was really one of the biggest concerns I had for City in general. And can't wait to delve into things. So let's go.
So we'll start off with the formation and the predicted lineup. So this is one where it is more a sort of an obvious 3-2-2-3 formation, but we've talked in previous videos about how formations and roles are becoming more fluid in the Premier League, especially depending on the phase. So Man City usually control most of the possession, so most of the time they're probably going to be in this shape because this is their more attacking phase shape. So starting goal, Ederson, I think that's usually one of the very, very few players we're confident will start pretty much every game. At the back, I've gone for Akanji, Diaz, and Ake. Now, Stones has a question mark because whilst we were doing our research for all these videos, there was a possibility that Rice could have gone there, but Stones is still the one that they seem to be trusting to be in that central defensive slash midfield slash defense role, alongside the stable that is Rodri. Now, Foden I have here as one of the midfielders, with Alvarez. Now, KDB's in brackets. You're going to talk a little bit about the injury, but the fact that he was supposed to miss the start of the season. So if KDB was fit, he would be in the game week 1 side. But as it stands, it's possible that he's not there. And up front, Grealish, Haaland, and Mahrez. But some of the transfer news coming out, it looks like Mahrez is pretty much gone now to Saudi Arabia, which is going to throw in a couple of potential question marks as to whether Alvarez is going to play that deep or is he going to join the attack. Maybe Bernardo Silva goes where Alvarez is and Alvarez goes where Mahrez is. People who are looking for particular FPL assets, the likes of Foden and Haaland, and Ederson and one of the defenders, they all seem to be pretty fit and ready to go. So how are you feeling about the Man City potential 11 for game week 1?
The only mini adjustment that I'd like to propose is that instead of calling it a 3-2-2-3, we just keep it simple and label them as a front five, because Man City's concept about beating the league has really been utilizing their front five to adapt to their opponent's shape. If they were to go up against a back four, for example, then they would transform into a front five, and that would be rather simple, because you imagine like 5 fingers slotting in between 4 gaps, right? So with since the league is transitioning into a 5-man defense in some cases for some teams, City can basically overload that back 5 and transition into a 2-2-6. So it really comes down to who City plays against, and the 2-3-5 is a template and a default system, but we just have to be aware that because Pep Guardiola is so insistent on overloads instead of rotations, then we can foresee that up against certain sides, we know that they will use a certain formation, and up against other sides like mid-table Brentford or something, they will definitely revert to the 2-3-5.
Whilst you were talking, I was just moving the guys around to sort of show that split of like the front 5 and the back 5, so to speak, with at times Rodri and Stones going a little bit forward as well, depending on how the game is going. Let's just go straight into the strengths. Look, the treble champions. The only issue in the past with FPL is when people have pointed at Pep Roulette. And the fact that in the past, when it was Liverpool and Man City, the top 2 teams, Liverpool were the best FPL side because you knew what the 11 was. But, Man City, you can have a player that plays really well and you think, well, he's going to get a string of games, and then he's dropped for 3 matches. And then he comes in and then he's dropped for the cup games and then plays the domestic matches. It's still difficult to pinpoint at times who's going to play, but one that doesn't seem to be able to get dropped is Haaland. So I am fairly confident that 99% of people right now are Haaland owners. And probably of that 99%, 98% of them are probably Haaland captainers. So we need to start to assess potentially where other parts of this side are going to get picked from managers, because some might argue that having just one City player is not going to be enough. But going to the strengths of this side, you've got Haaland, and if you can afford it, KDB. Now, KDB is a little bit expensive, and he is starting injured, but if you can stretch for that, because I think FPL pricing has been pretty generous this season, then I'm still not against that double up. People will argue points per million or points potential, but they're usually nailed. Great connection already, goals and assists. They score the most goals. They have the most goals inside the box, and they create the most big chances. So looking at it from an attacking point of view, they're the best team in the Premier League, as well as being the champions. They are statistically the best. So if you can beat Pep Roulette, especially with their more attacking players, you'd feel confident every single game that one of your players could potentially get something. If you pick Foden or Alvarez or Grealish or Haaland or KDB or Bernardo Silva even, if you get a player who consistently plays an attacking role in this Man City side, you'd feel confident every single time they step on the pitch. And that is a huge strength. The only sort of downside of that is picking that player who you think will consistently play Premier League matches. In style and in terms of football, the wonderful. The champions of 3 major competitions. It's just beating Pep Roulette, and if you can somehow do that, or have a decent backup sub, even if it's a 4.5 million nailed decent defender like Botman, right, at Newcastle,
Hugo Lewis,
or even if your third City player is a City sub, that might rotate in for them, because there's 5 subs, but Pep doesn't seem to usually use all 5 subs. He might only use 1 in a game. So if you've got a good backup, if you've got one defender, like you've just said with Lewis, if you choose Ake and you choose Haaland and you choose Lewis, the chances are you're probably going to get 2 out of 3. If you have a good 4.5 million backup like Botman, who's not going to be very usable in the first 5 weeks, if you choose 2 City assets and one of them starts and one of them doesn't, you'll have a decent one coming off the bench. And I think this might be a good time to risk that, given the fixtures that Man City have got, as well as how good they are anyway. What are your strength points for this City side?
So I'm going to preempt the audience a little bit, because there are 2 perspectives that we can take on this. So I will be a little bit smoother, a little bit more choo-choo train than usual. So here we go. Now, we've got 2 perspectives to look at this, and the first would be from an FPL perspective. The thing about Manchester City is that you can, like, we love playing the game because we believe ourselves that our efforts will be rewarded with points. At least we'd like to think so. And then you'd have a few big content creators that come along and say that FPL is 70% luck or something like that. So Man City is like the one team that rewards consistency, attention to detail, as well as noticing who is in favor, out of position, reverse out of position, and so on. Choosing them in terms of FPL is really a slightly difficult task. And again, it rewards the veterans, because when you choose, like, as you said, right, it's about how many goals they score per game. The size of the pie in terms of Man City matters. So if you look at their behaviors across August, September, compare that to, let's say, their December period, where they have the tendency to smash teams 5 or 6-0. You really have to pay attention to when that happens, because City, just like Brighton, are ruthless sometimes at punishing teams. And it's not the starting 11 that does it. Sometimes it's someone like Riyad Mahrez or Julian Alvarez that comes off the bench in order to score. So in that sense, like you mentioned, certain players getting 0 minutes and that being a good thing. I'd probably argue that some players who come on as subs would probably still be backed to score. Phil Foden is a very good example, and he was really backed last season midway, like just before the World Cup, I believe. Especially when people have confidence that he has the potential to haul no matter how many minutes he gets. It's the same thing with Haaland. It's the same thing with most City players that get majority of their starts. The thing about Pep Roulette is that it does not test your understanding and your knowledge about the game. It's actually testing your nerve, because, as you said, we only lose confidence when a player doesn't start 3 games in a row. But most City players actually start most games. Whenever you buy a City asset, you can almost certainly trust that he will appear 7 games out of 8. In the worst case, 4 games out of 5. Unless you pick somebody extremely risky like Bernardo Silva last season, even if you pick someone like Gundogan, he's going to be rested only like 2 games out of 5 at most. The only annoying thing is that they are rested for beautiful, easy games, and that is where we usually make our money. So you have a choice to make between choosing 3 City players and then banking on one of them to haul. That way, you have like a 17, 2, and 6, right? That's like about 25 points spread out over 3 players. That's a decent average. Or you can really make your money and make your investment worth its full value by having 2 players in the best position to score, so that you get, say, a 9-pointer and Haaland's 20. And then that's 29 points for 2 players. And it really tests our FPL manipulation and maneuvering in the game, so that we know as veterans that's where we stand out over the casuals. Okay, that's first spiel done. Second advantage in terms of tactics is that City are very, very well prepared for every single game. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about preparing for opposition or whether we are referring to their overarching tactical story across multiple seasons. City somehow innovate and they are unstoppable. That is the one thing City do well compared to the rest of the league. They have like a plan B and even perhaps a set of players ready in the wings to come on across the season. Rico Lewis was one of the biggest surprises because he was actually a player from the academy that was trained to move from fullback into midfield. Whereas in past seasons, Pep Guardiola had been attempting to use midfielders, started them at fullback, and then moved them into midfield. And when the experiment where he reversed the roles using a fullback like Cancelo to move in the midfield instead, when that failed, then he went, forget it. We are just going to go organic, and that is what I foresee happening this season, but in a more extreme. My opinion aside, City's beautiful strength is that even when we talk about their 2-3-5, within the 2, things change. Within the 3-man midfield, things change. You've already mentioned that Rodri himself can bomb into the box whenever things get tough. That 3 could be an upside-down triangle with Rodri at the base and 2 central midfielders. They did it against Inter Milan in the Champions League final. They can reverse it and have 2 central midfielders with 1 Gundogan bombing from deep midfield into the final third. They can have a flat 3 where they open up passing angles from wide half spaces. And that was how they did all these cross-field switches to find the wingers. But whatever happens, City's route to goal is extremely simple, and that is why we love City so much as an FPL asset. Just like Liverpool, in the Liverpool video I mentioned earlier, one wing must create for the other. It's very rare that you see a left central midfielder playing in a left winger. It's very, very rare that you see these small short passing combinations occur near opposition boxes. They are not Liverpool, they are not Arsenal, arguably they're not even Man United. They have width, they will use width no matter who is on the flank. And that is what's beautiful about City tactically. So that's really the 2 key strengths we see from Man City.
Some of their strengths from an FPL point of view seeps into the weaknesses, which you've already said about, so moving on to weaknesses, you said it yourself, the players start the majority. So on average, the starting 11 or the players close to the starting 11, they seem to start 22 Premier League games, which is all right. It's almost sort of like 2/3. It's in those games where they're against the newly promoted sides or the sides that are out of form, especially at home, where they're the real heavy favourites, where you really want that player to play, and that's when the likes of Rico Lewis comes in. So one potential strategy would be to have Lewis as a sub, and then when City seem to have a really easy game, that's the one where you put him in. And for 4.5 million, I don't think it's the worst. So the big weakness from a footballing side, they can leak the occasional goal. They don't concede many, but they end up winning 5-1, 3-1, 6-1. So for me as a long-time Edison owner for the last 2 seasons, that's frustrating. Also, when I've owned the likes of Stones, you've got to throw that into the ring of losing clean sheets on top of rotation for defenders. But just the key weaknesses, like you said, holding your nerve, keeping patient, and just accepting you won't beat Pep Roulette. It's going to happen. It's going to hit you. Unless you go for Edison or Kevin De Bruyne, who himself, mainly due to injury, was under 30 games. But you've only got Edison with 35 games, Rodri with 34 games, and Haaland with 33 games starting as the only ones that you could actually back. Now, you could argue why not Rodri for 5.5 million if you just want a Man City player to play most games, but he's a central defending midfielder. You don't really want that. Haaland, we've all got him. Edison, most people find is a trap, and he's 5.5 million and doesn't keep as many clean sheets as he should, and he's not going to get save points because Man City aren't going to get dominated. So it's just the weakness for this side is just choosing a player and having a good backup. Yeah, they might come on, but equally, if they don't, just make sure you've got someone on your bench who you're comfortable, probably 1/3 of the time, having to come on. So, in terms of weaknesses, I think that's just it. It's just the fact that they seem to concede the occasional goal, and can you mentally deal with the fact that you've got a 7 to 8 million pound player or a 4.5 to 5.5 million pound defender that you can accept every so often? 3 out of 5 games they play, 2 out of 5 they don't. Any weaknesses that you want to point out about Man City?
I don't think they have a settled centre back pair or centre back trio just yet. I think that's why they've experimented with Lewis, Akanji, Ake, Diaz, Laporte. I mean, Walker, right, and right centre back too. It really depends. And I find that it comes down to roles, because what Pep used to do, like his transitions tactically, went from one fullback into midfield, 3-2-5. Then at some stage he went both fullbacks into midfield, sure, 2-3-5. I wish you could move the pieces around as I said those things, because that's probably the best way to visualize this. In some cases, he pushes one fullback into midfield and one fullback outside of the wide midfielder. So that's a 2-2-6. I think in terms of weaknesses, I'll be a bit more elaborate on this and a bit slower, because we have to be very crystal clear about their weaknesses. Because in terms of FPL, we know that whatever weaknesses we perceive of Man City will be short term, because City aren't the type that hasn't thought about this. Pep Guardiola, admittedly, is the type of manager that isn't playing a perfect game. He is trying to ensure that his pros outweigh his cons. Traditionally, we know that possession football's weaknesses is transition. So, we always go like, whatever team that plays long balls over the top will punish City. Yes, we've seen that before. Gareth Bale has done it. Real Madrid has done it. That's not new. I think for City now, the biggest issue is the next move forward, trying to predict what strategy they want to do next. Because by staying ahead of everyone else, we can expect that the elite teams, Spurs have done it in their most recent friendly, Arsenal are expected to do it, Liverpool are expected to do it. We've talked about it in our last video. Question is, will City innovate again? And how will that screw us over? Because Joao Cancelo is one of the biggest factors. Him really not being extremely quiet on the transfer front so far probably implies that he will have another say, at least in reinventing himself in this side. Because when Cancelo plays left back, he's wildly different from, if he plays right back. And it's not that he struggled in the midfield role. It's more of that he outshone KDB at times as the playmaker from the right half space. In terms of weaknesses, we have to pay very, very close attention to whether Pep Guardiola is even about the half space, because I strongly believe that he will abandon that as a concept very soon, because so many teams in the league are using it. The moment somebody matches your system isn't novel, your system isn't unique, and you lose your competitive advantage. And that is probably what Guardiola is thinking of next.
And I also find, just adding to your weakness there about possession-based teams, I think Inter Milan and some other of the lower Premier League teams have shown that before, that if you really do sit back and don't allow those spaces and let them pass it around, they can have 2,000-3,000 passes a game. It doesn't matter if they don't score a goal or have the attempts. And I think Inter Milan in the final showed that even if you're a top side, a better team, not just a lower team, if you sit back and hit them on the break, you will potentially score. So I think that sometimes the formation and the roles and the possession-based style that managers like Pep will come out and complain that they're not playing football, they didn't come here to play, they just come and sit back and park the bus, but it works. If you go toe-to-toe with a team like City, you're going to get slapped, and it's not worth it. We'll go into the players to pick and ones to avoid, because the ones to avoid will go connecting to the weaknesses as well, because I want to talk about the defense a little bit. So top 3 picks, Haaland, all right, number 1, done. Number 2, I've gone for Foden. Gundogan has likely been replaced with Kovacic, right, as a like for like. But with Mahrez going and KDB, remember, we're talking about the start of the season. When we're doing these preseason guides and these team videos, we're looking at up until like the first wild card, right? We're not talking for the entire season. So if KDB is potentially injured and Mahrez goes, surely Foden is going to start more than, I think it was the 22 games he started last season. Foden, yeah, 22 games he started. Yes, Bernardo Silva's still there, but that's fine. They rotate. But if you've got one less winger there, surely that gives Foden some more minutes, and therefore he's an attacking player, more potential for points. And for my third choice, I've gone for Alvarez. I just think he's really interesting. Again, with Mahrez going, we know Alvarez can play down the middle in replacement of Haaland, but he can also play it out on the wing as well. So without Mahrez, I think that gives Alvarez more minutes. The fact that I think he's 23 now and he's growing, he did have 13 starts and 31 appearances. So you said it yourself earlier about coming off the bench for an attacking player feels good, right? If you've got Alvarez and you see him coming on in the 65th minute, you'll feel pretty happy that those fresh legs for Man City up front are going to potentially get something. And 9 goals and 1 assist in 31 appearances and only 13 starts. I just think for 6.5 million, it feels as though a lot of people have Haaland and like Gabriel Jesus, like an 8 million, or Haaland and maybe a 6 or 6.5 million. I could argue to start the season with something that I would be interested in if I wasn't just stuck with the A part I've said about Haaland and Gabriel Jesus, is starting Haaland and Alvarez. And again, having that defender substitute, 4.5 million to 5 million player who you're happy to come on with when Alvarez doesn't get any game time. But there's 38 games in a season and Alvarez has appeared in 31 of them and he's 6.5 million. So I just feel like if you're looking for value and you're looking for and as long as you've got a playing sub and the rest of your team isn't like really rotation risk heavy, then I think there's a real big argument. And if KDB is potentially out as well, there's a huge shout, I think, for Alvarez being a real hidden value player for 6.5 million. And I don't even look, with Manchester City, I don't even look at the fixtures, right? Because it's Manchester City. Of course, if they had like game week 1, Arsenal away, game week 2, Liverpool away, then I would be like, right, okay, maybe not. But the fact that they even have a good run of fixtures, attacking rivals are leaving the club or are injured, and he's 6.5 million and he made 31 appearances. Where's the risk? Where's the risk in that? Even if you want to play 4-3-3 or 3-4-3 and have Gabriel Jesus and Alvarez, you pit in a 6.5 Alvarez against a midfielder who's 6.5 or below. I just like it. I just like that as a hidden punt. What about your 3 picks for Man City?
You've put the words in my mouth. I am running a 3-4-3 with Gabriel Jesus, Haaland, and Alvarez up front right now.
Really?
Yeah. I mean,
what can I say?
I just had to make a choice between a 4.5 million midfielder or 4.5 million striker as cover. And seeing that how Balogun and none of the other strikers are really in the transfer news. I mean, Marvelous Nakamba is officially going to Luton. And, you know, I think the 4.5 million midfielder market is still extremely rife. So we just have to wait a bit more and the right midfielder will appear. At the same time, what's really nice about this particular game is that, this particular season is that 6.5 million for a striker is easy to downgrade into the Evan Fergusons and your Welbecks and your other 6.0 strikers that will come good after the transfer window closes. That is where we find true value, because we all know that even if we pick Alvarez now, it's a short-term punt. And It also allows you maybe 3 to 4 game weeks to see if they have a settled backline. I'm pretty sure anyone that has a Man City defender in their drafts right now is just leaving it for points structure. Sorry, for price structure rather than just, I'm convinced that John Stone is going to do well in midfield for Man City. Doesn't work that way. Very few people will start with 3 Man City players and even lesser with double attack because we are all looking at Foden, we are all looking at Haaland. It's just a matter of whether it's Haaland +1 or Haaland +2. And that's why Alvarez is my first pick. The only thing that I'd like to add nuance to is whether you trust the half space or the wingers to deliver first. For me, the obvious choice is Phil Foden because he can play half space or wide, but Foden has been a lot more effective on the left out wide. The question is whether Foden will be shunted to the right to accommodate Jack Grealish. All I can say right now is that if you foresee City punishing the likes of Burnley and Newcastle in the first 2 game weeks by crossing towards Haaland, go for it. Get the wingers. For me, I am a bigger believer of the half space dictating play, especially without KDB. Because in the opening stages, at least when we talked about Burnley in our last video, we mentioned their weaknesses as well. And Burnley's 2-man midfield is almost certainly going as expected to be swamped by City's midfield 3. No question about it. I think that's going to be a very big theme that everyone will agree with. And the moment people see that, they go, aha, half space. Because City don't operate with a number 10. The only thing I'd probably disagree with, as you mentioned earlier, was that Kovacic might be used to replicate the Gundogan role. I think I highly disagree there. Because Gundogan has a habit of running beyond Haaland whenever Haaland plays the pivot. Definitely do not see Kovacic doing that. In my mind, Alvarez is the one that will play as a conventional number 10, operating in the left half space and then running beyond Haaland in the opening stages. Similar to how City opened against West Ham. Haaland played the pivot, just played a nice short blind pass around the corner and Gundogan scored. Yeah, so that's why Alvarez is my top pick.
Just before we move on, just what you said, because we had the same idea about that front three. I think the only question is then, you said it yourself about the fixtures with Newcastle that second game. The only thing that's stopping me is it's Matoma. It's the 6.5 million midfielders like Matoma or Mbuemo versus Alvarez. But you've said it yourself. If he is that player that plays as the 10 in the half space and runs beyond Haaland, that has made your decision at the moment. Is that what swayed you? Alvarez over those 6.5 million midfielders?
That and my eternal quest to fit in the threemium of Haaland, Trent, and Salah. Yes. So by having Haaland, Trent, and Salah, it's enabled by owning Mitoma and Alvarez in attack.
Right, so you're missing...
That's how I afforded my Martinellis and my Jesuses. Yeah, it all comes together very, very well.
So you must only have one Arsenal attacker and one Manchester United attacker? Or you have no Manchester United?
I've completely ignored Man United for now.
Interesting. Well,
we will save for our next video.
Yeah, that'll be the next video.
We'll save it for the next video.
Okay, so Alvarez, you've got as a pick, and who are your other ones?
I think we'll have to state the obvious. Haaland and Foden are definitely up there. Bernardo Silva I see as a small potential weakness because we know that Pep has even experimented Bernardo Silva as a selfless left back. He did that against Arsenal, he got punished, but the moment Pep moved him to right wing, Bernardo Silva's potential just went all the way up. So, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, he's so good. Bernardo Silva he's like Gundogan. He just feels like he's one of the unsung heroes for Manchester City. I mean, a couple of years ago, he was player of the year for them, right? It's just put him anywhere. That's the good and bad thing about Bernardo Silva. If you want to own Bernardo Silva, if you see him in a midfield role, he might do something. If you see him in one of those attacking roles, he is an incredible asset. And again, it's just about getting those starts in. But preseason might give us a better idea of maybe where City are going to go in regards to their starting lineup, right? So let's go on to the traps or the ones to avoid. And I've said it earlier, and I said I was going to touch on it. It's just the defense and the goalkeeper. Now, we've talked about, we know the risks of Man City. We know they might not start, or we know they might not get any minutes in a game. But if an attacker comes on, there's still potential there. They score the most goals, they have the most chances, they have the most chances in the box. They're incredible. But from a defensive point of view, not one of their defenders got over 100 points. We've talked about this in other videos about if a defender plays so many minutes, like most of the over 30 games, and doesn't get score 100 points, that's an alarm bell because that means the defense isn't strong enough or it's not doing well enough. But the fact that it's their rotation, you said about not having a solid partnership at the back. It used to, a couple of years ago, it used to be Laporte and it used to be Diaz, right? Until they both got injured and new signings came in. But the fact that you can deal with your attackers getting rotated and maybe coming on for minutes because they score a goal or get an assist, they get points. You're going to have a defender come on and try and score because they're not going to get clean sheet points. And it feels as though Pep, if he's going to make a 90th minute substitution, it's going to be a defender coming on, and that's probably going to be your defender. Oh, and I said earlier about the likes of Edison, he's 5.5 million, so he's overpriced for no save points and clean sheets. And the fact that I said the joint fewest goals conceded, which is great, but he's fifth for clean sheets. So it just shows as well that not only are your defenders and Edison game rotated and Edison conceding goals, the clean sheet potential isn't there because they're only fifth for clean sheets. So not only do you need one of your defenders to consistently play pretty much every week, which they don't at Manchester City, you also need clean sheets, which Edison isn't keeping because they're fifth. Not one defender started more than 25 games last season. They're all split. They're all even including Stones into this. Akanji 24, Ake 22, Diaz 22, Walker 22, Stones 21, Laporte 11, even Cancelo 16. We don't know what's happened behind the scenes. He got shipped off to Bayern. Bayern don't want to buy him. Maybe he has a way back. We don't know. Rico Lewis 10. It's just a massive avoid. Edison, overpriced, doesn't keep as many clean sheets as he should with how many goals he concede, and the defense is just rotation city, and you can't hope for them to always keep a clean sheet. They'll probably win 5-1, which I said earlier. So yeah, for me, it's just avoid the defense because the attack has so much potential that you can risk. They can come on and maybe score a late goal or get an assist. What's the point in having a defender who starts 22 out of 38 games, comes on in the last minute for literally will get you one? I can't tell you how many times I got 1 point from John Stones. He'll get me a 10-pointer and then he'll get me 1 point every week for the next 8 weeks and not play. And then I've got a benching headache. Because do I play him? Because I don't know if he's going to play. I can risk it. I can mentally deal with it with a Foden or an Alvarez because I know what I'm going to get. I can't, maybe it's just my FPL playstyle, but I cannot have my defenders being that rotation risk. My attackers, we know they come and go, but defenders, every week you just want your same back three or your same back four, and you're like, I got these guys because they play for good clubs, they don't concede a lot of goals, they play every week. And that third point is a key thing for my defense. Like they play pretty much every game unless they're injured. That's the weakness for me. It's the defense and the goalkeeper included in it.
You've done most of the homework, so I'm not going to repeat any of the names that you've mentioned. So I'm just going to add one to that list. New signing Josko Gvardio, whose arrival is imminent. I think that one would probably be the biggest trap of all because he looks really good playing for Leipzig, but he has played mostly the outside left centre back. So if he displaces Ake instead of Akanji, then he's not exactly expected to play an attacking role. He'd probably serve as the second centre-back because he's also played a number of games at centre-back for Leipzig. I think that's really pretty much it. The only question really comes down to who gets bonus. I think that's probably the only incentive that we can foresee for City defence, and that's why the likes of Diaz and Laporte were so attractive in the first place. That's really all I can add.
Yeah, well, the midfield still dominate the bonus. Stones was the best defender with 13, but obviously he's in that more midfield role. Edison only got 8. De Bruyne with 26 bonus, of course Haaland with 40, but we don't need to talk about him. But interestingly here, Alvarez got 14 bonus points. Considering we said earlier he has like more bonus points than starts, Mahrez only got 11 and Foden got 15 for bonus. So again, you're looking at Alvarez as a potential cheap asset, great value gem, and he's a pretty good magnet for bonus as well when he's coming off the bench even. I think that's it for the Man City side. I don't think we have any more points. It's pretty obvious. You know the risk you're going to get in attack. They're a fantastic attacking side. Defense is possibly something to still stay clear for. Walker might be leaving to Bayern Munich, but if he doesn't, that makes the defense even more of a rotation risk because they've got like 7 great defenders to play in three defensive position roles, and that's just not going to happen. If I was going to choose one, it probably would be Stones because it feels he's slightly safer in that new attacking role, and he could become a centre back or even a right back if Man City need. So he has more position options available to him. But the likes of Laporte, Ake, Diaz, Akanji, and etc., they're just, you don't know. So it's one to avoid. But thanks for joining us today. Man City, great side, huge potential. We're possibly going to start with 2 or 3 Man City players in our sides if we're feeling a bit risque. But next up, it's their red rivals, the Red Devils, Manchester United, who have been causing a pretty big stir to start this season with some very, very attractive players. But I feel Lucian's not going to be feeling that way considering he currently has 0 Manchester United assets in his side. But thanks very much for joining us, and as always, have a good one.